Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jared Lindsay, and I'm joined with Tucker Boys, and we are the moderators for Alchemy Theater Company's very first Alchemy Roundtable for Artists of Color. We are here with just an incredible panel of artists who have taken time out of their days to come together and talk about racism, systematic oppression, the police, protesting, what's happening in our world, and how the theater community can talk and learn and grow from this. Thank you to everybody on the panel that came out to share their voices with us. We appreciate it so much. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Tucker. He's going to introduce all of our panelists, and they're going to introduce themselves with their names, their relationship to Alchemy Theater Company, and how they're feeling right now in the light of the situation that we're all a part of right now.
So, hello, everybody. We're going to start by introducing our panel with Monika Peña.
Hi, everybody. I'm Monika. I know Alchemy through a few of their company members, like her and Jeff and Kelsey. Very good people, very good friends, very good artists. And I guess I'm feeling a lot of things like many of us are. We're grieving, we're sad, we're angry, we're confused, but most of all, I think I'm hopeful and happy to see how strong we are, and seeing a lot of people coming together and really motivated for change.
Next up, we have Kumari Small.
Hello, my name is Kumari Small. I actually did curtains with Alchemy, I think last year or 2 years ago. I don't know. It feels like it was like forever ago, but it was probably really recently. But I also know like several of the members just from like outside stuff as well. I'm kind of feeling, you know, at first it was just so heartbreaking, you know, everything that's going on is just taken a very like serious toll on me. But I think now I'm just feeling hopeful, you know, seeing a lot of people like that are on board and that are, you know, really passionate about making a change. It's made me really optimistic and really hopeful for the future.
Fantastic. Next up is Jeff Jacobs.
Hello, my name is Jeff, and I was in a production of Jeff Lowe's The Butler Monologues last year, and that's my association with the theater and this theater, Alchemy. And regarding what's going on now, well, I will say that it feels different. It feels different than '92, and I was in my 20s then, and it feels bigger and more, and there's as much as it's been painful to witness and see, and it still feels like there's some sort of hope that I haven't really experienced through maybe the longevity of the protests, the consistent message that has been laid out, but it feels hopeful while at the same time being pretty devastating.
Absolutely. Ryan Hahn.
Hello, I'm Ryan. I did a production of A Comedy of Errors with Alchemy Theater before I shipped off to college. I'm half Korean American on my dad's side, for those wondering. And I have been dealing with a lot of fear, a lot of feeling like just being frozen in a fight or flight kind of place. But I just literally just got back from a protest that had a huge turnout in my town of Bellingham, Washington, up here. And just being surrounded by people who feel the same, and just some sanity in the world was really reassuring. And that is how I am feeling right now.
Awesome. Gabby Jackson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gabby. My pronouns are she, her. I'm really glad to be here today. As far as how I'm feeling, I am Black, so I'm exhausted, and I'm fearful, and I've had to explain several times to my little sister, you know, what's going on, and she's 11, and so I'm having to relive some of my own trauma from my youth. So I'm emotionally drained, but activated. I'm the founder and director of a new movement called the Judd Johnson Initiative, and we are building systemic equity in the arts through assessment and reflection. So we're calling other theater makers in to our movement and hoping that we can create some serious and activated change together. So thank you for having me today. Black Lives Matter, and I'm glad we're here.
Thank you, Gabby. We're going to be discussing that at some point during our roundtable as well. Robyn Harrison.
Good evening. I'm Robyn Harrison, and my association with Alchemy was in the production, the Butler monologues this past fall. In regards to how I'm feeling right now, I think Jeff and I are pretty close in age. I just recently discovered once I got to know him. And so, yeah, there's 92. There's all the stories that when I was 5 years old during 68, hearing the stories from my mom about protests and police brutality and things like that, they left an indelible mark on me. And very much like Jeff had said, it's different. I originally started out with a feeling of disbelief that we're seeing something that's happened before. Then it became fear when I saw how widespread it was becoming, and then it became anger. And that anger is now trying to evolve itself into optimism. Very much like you did, I had attended a protest in Huntington Beach last Sunday that ended up with a tear gas dispersal. And my wife and daughter were back at Huntington Beach today for this one. And the optimism is growing because of the fact that people very much like Benny and Gabby and a lot of you that I can see right here are young people, because you guys are making up the great majority of the people I'm seeing out there, and not just people of color. So the reason why I'm sensing and feeling this optimism is that I feel like once this tends to kind of taper down a little bit, it's not just going to fall by the wayside and be delegated, to the sidelines of history. I honestly have this belief and this hope that something carries over through this, that there's going to be some type of monumental effect going forward with this.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. And Bennie Latham.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bennie Latham. I am affiliated with Alchemy through Jeff and Kelsey. I had the pleasure of sharing the stage with Jeff Lowe when we did a production at Stages Theater. We did a production of The Merchant of Venice, and one of my favorite plays. And yeah, how am I feeling? I will give you a quick anecdote. So I was a little thing in 1992 with the Rodney King situation, and I remember having nightmares as a kid, thinking that people were going to kill me. And a few days ago, I had to have my mother reassure me like most children do. And a few days ago, I'm the bonus mom of a beautiful 12-year-old Black girl, and I had to have that same talk with her all these years later. So to say that I am heartbroken is an understatement of sorts. But through all of that, I am somewhat reassured, because Will Smith said something once. He said that racism has always been there. The only difference between then and now is that it's being filmed. And now we are in a position to hold certain people accountable. And for that, I am deeply and profoundly grateful. And I am also so grateful for the allies that I've seen kind of rise from all of this and really speak on our behalf and really fight. And something like this would have never happened a decade or so ago. This roundtable is a huge step in the right direction. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for bringing us to the table.
Thank you for being here. It really is an honor. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Judd Johnson.
Hello, folks. I apologize. I'm in a lobby right now trying to arrange my situation. I am the the professor of the group. I'm not sure who else is an educator, but I've been teaching at the university level now for about 15 years. I've taught at University of Florida, Notre Dame, Cypress College in Orange County, and now I'm at CSU Bakersfield. I've been teaching theater and acting, performance. I'm a professional actor myself. Now, my role in this really is about where do we, when it comes to training and educating, speaking, using our voices to using our voices to really, where are we going to stand, there, using our voices in order to, sorry, getting a little, let me sit down for a second. Okay. Where, how do we train the next generation? Storytelling, and where do we stand there? So that's really sort of my role. Let me shovel myself together, and then I'll be able to say more here for you.
We honor your humanity. Don't worry.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and take your time getting together. We're all going to be here at this table, and we are going to be starting with our questions. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jared for our first question.
Yeah, thank you again, everybody. So first off, we want to start by asking, what does systematic oppression mean to you as an individual, as a person of color, as an artist of color? If you are willing to share, we would like to know how you have experienced it in your own lives. And we're going to combine it with the second question, just for the sake of time. What do the police symbolize to a person of color? What do they mean to you? And we want to get your personal takeaways.
If we are holding space right now to talk about the police, I would like to honor the Black lives that have been lost to police violence, just with a small moment of silence, because I don't think we did that coming into this. So we need to stop and pause for that, because that's what this change is activated by. So can I just have you facilitate that here just for a moment?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll take a moment of silence right now, everybody.
Thank you for that time of quiet reflection. And I want to say the names of Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and of course George Floyd, who have been the galvanizing entities and lives behind this whole branch of the movement that has happened. And I think that the change that we're feeling in this time is because we are all able to sit in silence with ourselves at home, because we have had some very poor leadership in the last few years, and now have been led directly into a global pandemic. So we now have time not plugged up by going to work and being able to go to the spaces that we would usually occupy outside of our homes, in our homes, and really do the reflective heart work of what it means to be a person in general, because sometimes we forget our humanity and don't honor ourselves as human beings. But also, I think we're able now to sit with ourselves and our emotions and our feelings. And then as a Black person, personally, what this means to me is that even at a time when we are flattening the curve, right? Even at a time when we're staying home to save lives, to flatten the curve, to make sure that we are, able to survive this global pandemic, people who look like me are still being shot in the street for looking like me. So what that means to me is that my life is not valuable. which I know is not the truth or the reality of what this is. What I know to be true is that my humanity is honorable, that I deserve to take up space and that my life matters. But what it says to me about the system and the way that our government functions, because no one should be able to die over a $20 bill and not have somebody immediately be brought into justice. So what that says to me about the system and the people that it protects is that it's time for a change. It is time for all of us to step up. And I'm really glad to be seeing the allies who are doing their part by actively donating to Black Lives Matter movements, and actively donating to the families of those that are lost. But I am really sad and would like to call in the allies who are simply reading something from a list that's been sent around on Facebook. And I'm hoping that I can call you in to do better, my friends that are watching this now. And I thank you to you who are actually putting in the work to radically change the system.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Gabby. Anybody else?
I think when it comes to at least my identification, when you talk to, I think there is no question that I'm sure systematic oppression and where that stands, where that is, at least for me personally, it's that sort of ingrained, and we know the definition of what that means, right? That sort of deeply ingrained those systems that are placed in almost every faction, every function of where we are. Of our society. So if it's in police, if it's law enforcement, if it's in education, of course, that's where my world. If it's in in terms of banking, wherever that is, we find it sort of slowly revealing itself. And I'm shocked in a way that it takes someone's death. And not just one person's death, of course, but it's like it sort of fed up to this. But this was the linchpin that all of a sudden people are starting to see it, starting to see these stories being revealed out to them, and so there's where for me personally, it's the revealing of that systematic racism. What is the system? Is it the cops that are bad? Or is it the system within law enforcement that's bad? Or is it embedded into there? And it goes back through time. It's bigger than the person. It's bigger than the people. It's bigger than the guy. The guy who put the knee in the neck is bigger than him. And as long as we focus on that, we lose something. We have to get we have to get better on that. So yeah, I think there is there is something that's really beautiful about this right now. This whole movement. I'm just really curious about where this goes. And is this something that ends next week and then we forget? Do non-peoples of color, do they get tired of it? Do they get is this like, okay, we're done? Can we get over it? Where does this, and hopefully it doesn't. I'm inspired by seeing so many white folks stand up and I saw a gentleman the other day standing on a corner. He was in Glendale, of all places. He's a white guy, and he, probably in his 20s or 30s, and he had a sign up, holding a sign, Black Lives Matter, and by himself in the corner of middle of Glendale. And I mean, these are the sort of pivotal moments that change, where change begins. And as long as I'm recognizing, and everyone else is recognizing that, and white folks are recognizing that racism is a white problem, that America was built on the original sin, and until that original sin is reconciled, we're going to continue to have this problem. And so when we say racism is a white problem, no, what racism isn't just uniquely white. Of course, we can go to different cultures and different times and see racism exists, of course, but in this space, in this place, and right now, racism is a white problem. And until white folks stand up and say, no, this is not right, we aren't going to see change. And now we're seeing it. I'm sort of at a loss right now for words with it. So systematic racism, what is it? And the last little bit here is just me saying there is a level at which we Black folks have to go through a process of decolonizing our own minds. We have to decolonize this first. We've gotten so used to this, getting, you know, oh, that's the way it's supposed to be, then that's what I'll do. Fine, I'll do it just so I can survive. I'll cope, I'll deal with it. And even I have had to sort of decolonize my own mind. What is, you know, they've done such a great job at convincing us that this is the way it should be, until you realize it's not the way it should be. In casting, in education, and and storytelling, the stories that we tell, we have to figure out a way to stop to sort of understand that process amongst ourselves and decolonize our own minds first. It begins here first. So, yeah.
I wanted to just really quickly say that you know, because this is happening globally too, and I know we're probably focusing on America, but it is happening globally, and I just happen to see, and this just speaks to how deeply ingrained, as Judd was saying, it is, and it comes out in these interesting and gross ways. And there was this, I don't know if anyone else saw it, but there was a Australian television, some sort of news channel, and they were interviewing these twins. These twins, one happened to be Black, one happened to be white, and the woman who was describing them said, oh, and this is, I forget her name, she's obviously Black and, you know, dark skin. And then there's the other one who's got the fair skin of, you know, I forget what she said, but the fair skin, good on ya. And she was just really like, good on ya about the color of her skin. And that just speaks to how deeply ingrained it is that she didn't think twice about saying that. She didn't think twice about how that Black girl, her twin sister, felt. Didn't think about it while she said it. Didn't think about it after she said it. Not until I'm sure that not until someone maybe said something to her that she considered it. And that doesn't, by the way, that doesn't make her a horrible person. The woman who said that, she is not an awful human being, but that's just how deeply ingrained it is.
If I can jump in on that, and I saw that interview and I was just cringing so hard at the lack of sensitivity, because that's what it was. The lady doesn't understand. She doesn't know that she doesn't know, that interviewer who made that comment. When you talk about, when Judd brought up decolonizing the mind and how it begins with us, that statement resonated with me on so many levels. After I did Merchant with Jeff, I had a bunch of people come and congratulate us on a great show. And then one person made the comment, I didn't know Black girls did Shakespeare. And all I could say in that moment was, well, surprise. That's all I could say. And, you know, from being told that I talk white to from Black people, and then hearing white people say, you are so articulate, you speak so well. It just, yeah, it starts within our own community. Yes, Black girls do Shakespeare, and yellow boys do Shakespeare, and brown girls do Shakespeare. And yes, Shakespeare is art, it's words. And all of this is make-believe anyway, right? But yeah. And one of the things that I'm concerned about with this movement and the momentum that has been created as a result of social media, as a result of Twitter and people tweeting things live, you know, in contrast to what the news will allow to be reported, I'm afraid that with the trendiness that people will capitalize off of the struggle. And that's been a concern of mine, I think deeply embedded in my core. I hope that we don't become like the unicorn frappuccino, hot 1 minute, not the next. And I think the theater also has this weird fascination with capitalizing off of the struggles of people of color. If you look at the shows that are on the Great White Way, pun intended, I don't know. The shows that get funded tend to be about oppression, tend to be about struggle, tend to be about, oh, inner city, the hood, and things of that sort. It's very seldom that you see anybody of color, let alone Black folks, if we're not singing and dancing and rapping, or if it isn't Miss Saigon or Flower Drum Song, y'all don't see us. When and where? So it is my hope that it doesn't become trendy and then dies off until something else pops off and people jump onto that. I genuinely hope that this movement will change the way we think. I'm holding on until then. I'm hanging on to that hope because art is universal. We are all human beings having a human experience, regardless of ethnicity, or maybe in spite of ethnicity. When I was in high school, I went to Buena Park High. The teacher there was Joe Parrish. I love him dearly, and I thank God for Joe Parrish, because not only did he introduce me to Tennessee Williams and Shakespeare, he introduced me to Lorraine Hansberry. He introduced me to August Wilson. He introduced me to Susan Laurie Parks. And he was the true definition of colorblind casting. We did a production of The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. I played the role of the mom, and I had 2 white children. And the audience was shook. Child, we entered that thing into the festival, and the first thing the judge said, nothing about the acting, nothing about the production. He goes, so you have a Black mom and 2 white kids? And Joe was like, yeah. Mind you, this is a white man from Texas saying that. Just gave him the blank stare, like, yeah. He's like, well, aren't you afraid that people are gonna? No, this is all make-believe anyway. It's a family story. Unless it was ethnically specific, he didn't give a crap. If you were right for the role, you were right for the role. And until we start seeing, you know, the tropes change, and until we change the trope in our minds and remind ourselves as people of color that, yeah, we can do classical stuff. It's not, you're not selling out your culture if you speak the King's English. It's, yeah, tough road to hoe. Not impossible, though. All right, I'm gonna stop.
I want to seize on this momentum, especially when we talk about systematic oppression. Systematic oppression is a lot of things. It's a lot of what Judd said when he mentioned, when he mentioned decolonization. I used that word countless times. It's about, if you ever get a chance to listen to this beautiful monologue by Trevor Noah just recently, it's also about a contract. As a child, you make a contract to your mom growing up in Compton that you're going to get an education, that you're going to learn everything that they try to teach you, because this is what they say is going to lead you to success. So, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about my mom. So my mom ingrained that in me. And so institutional racism is that. It's going to school and reading books that are written in and are 20 years, that are made 20 years before you actually attended school. And it's basically, you know, the Dick and Jane books. And it's things that you can't relate to. That's what that is. It's growing up in a neighborhood where not only do you see that, but you see eggs and rocks thrown at your window and you wonder why. It's all about having relationships with police and having to have that talk. I mean, people talk about Black parents having to have that talk. We've been having that talk probably since about the 1950s. You know, where your parents have to say, you know, always say please and thank you, and always call the police officer sir, and always let them know what you're going to do before you do it. It's growing up with, you know, siblings, all 7 of my siblings who have been in jail for some reason or another. A lot of these things were basically ridiculous. Having one brother who just turned 60, who has been in jail, in prison since 17. And he, on the average, you know, gets out for about a week after about an 8-year span. Institutional racism is about having someone in prison for 8 years and then putting them out in the world without letting them know what to expect, and almost expecting them to be back in there within the next couple of months, which is exactly what happens. It's all about these these things that you're told to do. It's hearing my mom tell me things when she sees, you know, on the side of a dam in 1976 saying celebrating 200 years of freedom. And she'll tell me, you know, yeah, freedom for some people, but not everyone. It's hearing that. It's listening my mom sit and talk about letters that she exchanged back and forth with an activist from the 60s and 70s named Angela Davis, and listening to these letters and really admiring what it is, but never really quite understanding it until I get to high school, where I'm the only black kid in my high school because she moved us out of the neighborhoods to make us safe. And being the only one there and hearing black jokes and hearing the way people expect you to be, and having teachers send you to someone else's classroom saying, hey, listen to him read, as if it's an aberration that, you know, that I can be articulate in some way, shape, or form. It became so frustrating. Yet I had to take it because my mom had to remind me of that contract that I had to fulfill to get where I wanted to go. And very much like Benny's experience, when I went to college, you know, all of a sudden this is my first time really experiencing, you know, what it's like, you know, in the real world, to see people that I'd never experienced before. I'm Jewish right now. My first experience with Jewish people was in college, but all of the teachers that were there, all of them were Jewish at that particular time, and understanding and learning about their experiences as well, and then understanding that we have so much in common. And it's waiting until you reach that period in your life that you suddenly understand that that's institutional, you know, racism. It's living in a city where you understand the good parts of law enforcement and police, and understanding the worst parts of them. Understanding that the good parts, and I know he's been vilified like crazy, but you have someone like Lee Baca, who was one time the sheriff of LA County. When I grew up, Lee Baca was the watch commander at the Carson Sheriff Station. He and his officers visited our neighborhood. He got to know us by name. One of the greatest things this man ever did was every time my mom would have to come out and bail out my brother, or have to go there and try to get one of my brothers or sisters out, he always came to our house days after to find out how we're doing. He knew that I loved to draw, and he brought paper and pencil for me as a little kid to be able to draw. That's the good part. But you don't see that anymore. This is what institutional racism looks like, is that you have officers who go into a neighborhood almost as if they are an occupying force. They don't know that are there. These people get shot by people who are complete strangers, and they experience so many things. I have had encounters with police officers who, when I was in a neighborhood that I wasn't familiar with, asked for my ID, and for some peculiar reason, asked me to lay face down on the sidewalk while he checked my ID. I have had officers, when I had a transaction with a real estate officer in my car, we're there together, and all of a sudden we're surrounded by cars because we're in a parking lot exchanging paperwork for a real estate transaction, and my friend, who is black, but she passes as white, was allowed to go. But then 2 other cars show up, and I am lectured. My car is taken apart from the inside out. I'm told that we don't want your kind around here, and I want you out of my town, literally. I've had guns in my face from officers who've come to pick up, you know, my siblings from the house. You know, it's all part and parcel of the whole thing. Yeah. And it's painful to understand that, you know, I can't even get on a jury, because when you're in that jury box, all of a sudden they ask you questions. And again, because you're part of that contract, you're being asked, you know, okay, to swear on an oath that you're going to tell the truth. Okay, I'm going to tell the truth. How many of you have, they will say, how many of you have had bad experiences with police officers?
Mm-hmm.
How many of you have had friends or family arrested by the police? You know, how many of you have had to go to court and have had to, all these different things? And my hand would go up, and I actually got taken aside by a judge and the two attorneys on a sidebar. They're thinking that I'm trying to get out of it. No, I wanted to fulfill my part of the contract. I wanted to serve on a jury, and you know, I had to explain to them that everything there was true.
Right.
So they finally, you know, said okay. And then one of them made a joke, a little off-color joke, saying, "Well, you must have been the black sheep of the family." As I'm going back to the box, and eventually, about 30 seconds later, they excused me, and I've gotten taken off of 3 juries because of that. So, you know, the contract says that you have to do things a certain way. The contract, you don't see the fine print in the contract that says that if you want fair treatment, if you want to get a good deal on insurance, you can't live in this particular zip code. You're not going to see, you know, in the contract that says that if you're going to go interview for a job, your name can't sound like Jamal, you know, or whatever, you know, in order to get that job. And when someone says, well, I don't see you in that position, you don't quite understand that until later when someone tells you that. The place I'm living in right now, I had to fight for and almost had to go to court for because the manager said, well, one of the neighbors had a run-in with a big black guy a couple of years ago, and so the owner wants to know a little bit more about you. And
wow.
I mean, my rabbi got more ticked off about it than I did. But this is what we go through, and it affects every aspect of your life. I mean, you could go through the entire history from 1619 to today and understand why we're still in this position right now. But just like Judd says, and all of you else have said, you know what? It's going to take a traumatic experience. I thought that was in 92. I guessed wrong. It's going to take something bigger than what's happening right now before people really understand. And I'm sorry, that was my rant.
No, it's the truth. And, you know, you're speaking from personal experience. So of course you're going to be hot and upset and verbose. And you know, like, but the thing is like, this is blood knowledge, right? All of this is blood knowledge, and everything that we are experiencing, the way that we feel it and the depth with which we feel it is because it's ancestral. Because our ancestors were snatched from their beds and from their joyous celebrations and captured and dragged on boat to be slaves, right? We were captured from our communities and taken out of love and taken into one of the, if not the greatest atrocity that has ever befallen the world. You said the original sin, Judd. You know, it's true. That's what it is. And so, and also on the flip side of that, there's ancestral knowledge on the part of white folks too, right? Because racism is an institutionalized lineage, right? That was intentionally left by white folks' ancestors in order to pass down to their line, right? And I think, and not to like call anyone out, I'm calling everyone in, of course, but I'm saying that, like, you know, a lot of people, the guilt that people are feeling in these moments right now is because that blood knowledge is it can be in opposition with what we're actually feeling in our hearts as people. And so a lot of the time the response is like, oh, let me send you $25, but like, you can't $25 away from that ancestral, your blood knowledge, right? The only thing that you can do is begin the work of the undoing of that system that you've inherited.
Right. And how do you convince someone when you watch these commercials about 23andMe and Ancestry DNA and things like that? And I took the DNA test. I've been on Ancestry.com now for about 3 years. And when you tell someone how badly you want to understand your family, yet the farthest I can go is maybe about the middle of the mid 1800s. And then after that, I'm told, you know, it basically, the chances are everything in your family from that particular point on, there's no such thing as a birth certificate. There might be a receipt.
Yes.
You know, on the same page where someone bought a horse, there might be, you know, your ancestor on that same receipt. And so basically you lose everything right there, you know, unless you happen to be as lucky as Alex Haley. So there's so many stories that are there that people don't understand, and so many that people that just don't want to hear it. And that's the frustrating. It's the get over it mentality.
Oh yes. Oh yes. That happened so long ago. That's not me.
Right.
Why are you still holding a grudge? There's a reason why I go by Bennie Latham. I did an experiment before I joined SAG-AFTRA. My given name is Benesha, right? And I got very specific auditions with the name Benesha. Just gonna let that sit. Exactly. So as soon as I changed to Bennie Latham, first of all, Benny is a unisex name. They don't know if I'm a dude or a lady or in between. And it sounds Caucasian. It sounds middle America. It doesn't sound threatening. I made a joke once when I did an impromptu stand-up routine, and I said, Benesha doesn't sound like she thinks the customer's always right. So that's why I go by Benny. Because Benny sounds friendly, Benny sounds hopeful and youthful and happy. And it's a shame. But how many other entertainers had to change their names to fit in? Not just Black folks either. There were some Jewish folks, some Goldbergs, and some you know, Rita Hayworth was Maria Cancino from Mexico.
Right. Raquel Welch was Raquel Tejada.
Come on. So we had to take the seasoning out, had to water it down, make it more palatable. And then there's the complexion connection. Oh, Benny, you're Black, but you're not that Black. Excuse me.
Speak on it. Speak on it.
Excuse me. I'm very much aware that I get treated differently than my darker brothers and sisters. I would be a fool and be spitting on the grave of my late grandmother if I didn't acknowledge that I have a certain amount of access. I can't get all the way to the finish line, but I can get a lot closer than many other sisters that, you know, are going for the same role because of this.
Right.
And I own that, and I take responsibility for that, and I make space for my sisters because we're all artists, we're all capable, and yeah, I don't do that. Ain't no tip on these broad shoulders. No, thank you.
And thank you for sharing that. It's very personal about your name, and you're right. It's something that happens to a broad spectrum of people, not just Black people, as you say. And Gabby brought up an interesting point. Let's talk about guilt. How do you think guilt plays into protest and action? And
I absolutely think guilt creates social pressure, and social pressure creates change. Of course, but when it's founded in guilt, how long is that change going to last? Until you've absolved yourself? Until you've separated yourself? Until you've said, that's not me, or I sent enough of my... like, how long are you going to... How long is guilt going to be a motivator for you? And if it lasts, is that really what I want from you? Giving me something because you feel guilty.
Yeah. I would throw the idea that, and I agree with Gabby 100%, but I would throw the idea that maybe this happens in phases. So it has to begin with maybe a guilt phase where you get to that phase and go, okay, dang. Wow. I feel really terrible. I feel bad that I did that to that person, that white person did that, put his knee nonchalantly with his hand in his pocket, that he was with his wife and his daughter and he got shot in Philando Castile. Like, wow, I feel horrible. I think it starts there. But then there has to be a natural progression to the next step. Like, what's the next step? And generally what happens, and this is around the reason why a lot of Black folks, at least for me, have problem with quote unquote guilt is because it starts with guilt and it goes there, and then the guilt goes away and it's done. It doesn't go to the next step. And the next step is, well, then what do you do with that guilt?
Action.
How does that guilt then, initiate change, initiate the next phase of what do you do, how empathy and what do you do? Like I posted a little something, I'm not sure, Tucker, you saw, he's like, do one thing every single day that initiates change. One thing, if it's protest, if it's, I don't care what it is, do one thing. Because guilt it'll take you to one thing and maybe two things, and you'll do it because it's popular, because it's trendy right now. Right now it's trendy. Black Lives Matter is very trendy right now. Let's be honest. Right now, it wasn't trendy before. NBA knows that. Colin Kaepernick knew that. It wasn't trendy before when Colin Kaepernick was talking about Black Lives Matter's knee was down. It wasn't trendy.
What you say?
It wasn't trendy. But now it's very, very trendy. And that's okay. I don't mind. I would rather it be trendy. I'd rather the NFL find and turn and apologize to that man. But it's everyone that's doing it. So it's like, okay, I get that. I'm okay with the guilt. But now the next step.
You want the end result of that guilt to be ownership, which is
ownership.
Right? Which is kind of weird when you think about it. But but you want it to be ownership. I don't feel bad about this. I own this. This is something I'm going to live. I am going to put out into the world. I'm going to make happen. I'm going to see that others make it happen because this is mine.
What am I doing to educate myself?
Take that guilt and turn it into accountability and turn it into ownership and turn that into action and take action. And I've been seeing so many people, so many like young people like myself doing that. And it's just from a place of them having like older siblings, older parents that just don't care, and they feel guilty for that, and they don't want to pass that on to the next generation, and so on and so forth. And I think the more people that can just understand that and do that, the more change can happen, right?
Change has to begin with you. If it doesn't begin with you, you have the guilt and then change, and then where's the change? It starts with you. You can tell everybody else to change, or white folks can be like, I feel guilty, but until you become the change, right? Ryan, I'm sorry. Go ahead, my man.
I'm hearing my therapist's voice in my head right now. And he is wanting me to emphasize the difference between guilt and shame, because guilt is I did something bad, and shame is I am bad. And guilt is useful and shame is not. Because what happens is that people on the right, people against Black Lives Matter movement, they feel the guilt, and it morphs into shame in their brains, and they don't like that, so they push it away, they deny it, they excise it from their reality. What it's relating me to is, so every Asian guy in America knows like the most common, I don't even know if it's a microaggression or just an aggression, but it's like small dick jokes. It's like everybody gets them all throughout high school, throughout college, even freaking like middle school. And I had this one interaction with a friend where he, I don't even remember what the specific joke was, but he made it, and I called him out. I said, hey, that is hateful. Don't do that. And the like train of apologies I got after that, it was just like, I don't want your emotional labor on me right now. Just make the correction and move on.
And do better for your guilt.
Exactly. So that it's shame versus guilt, and I've been trying to call it out in my friends when I see it, of like, hey, this is for you, and feel those feelings, but it's for you. Just know that.
I would love to talk on the point of why this feels different than like you guys have said since '92, and I think it's because of today's technology. I think we have such a strong voiced generation coming back again. We had one before, but now because of technology, we are holding people accountable. We're saying, Mom, Dad, I'm not going to put up with it. Friends doing this, I see you, or I see your silence. And we're not letting things slide anymore, which I think is why we have so much hope, is because we won't let it slide. There's all this stuff around us that won't let it happen.
Oh, yeah.
Monika, you bring up a really great point, especially you guys are jumping almost ahead of all of our questions, and we thank you guys so much. It's incredible. But yes, talking about how social media, especially now, is affecting this kind of change, and we want to kind of ask you guys now, like, what do you think are those next steps? What are those actions that we can take between yourselves, allies, and that? And also, we want to talk on this point of performative activism, because that's something that we've been seeing a lot of with social media, so that social media can affect that change, but also like, what is change? What is performative? We'll let you guys go for it.
Performative is saying that you feel one way and then acting in another. Like, that's performative. I've personally recently just been really interested in seeing like lots of allies, new allies, which I love to call people into the movement at all times, you know. However, the thing is, it's like, you know, you're new to this and I'm true to this, and there's a difference. And the difference, okay, listen, but the difference is that, you know, there are people who are living it and there are people who are talking a big game. And to me, the performative aspect is like, you have said some really nasty things, or you have done some really nasty things, or you are continuing to do some really nasty things behind closed doors, and I'm privy to it because you think I'm one of the safe ones. And I see you, I hear you, I know you, and there you are saying Black Lives Matter. My personal Black life doesn't matter to you, so it can't be possible that Black Lives Matter. And I don't say that in anger, I just say it in like, exhaustion, you know? I say it in exhaustion.
They want all of our rhythm and none of our blues, sis.
Come on. Come on.
So we hold them accountable, right?
Until we hold them. And the thing that I think I've been most impressed with and so excited about is that, like, the allyship, right? Because originally coming into this moment, I was very defensive and like, I think Jeff was the one that I was talking to. And I was like, well, if you only have two of us, then like, you know, then maybe you should parcel it out and just have conversations. But I was like frustrated,
right?
From a true place, like from a place of truth.
Yes.
Because usually this is, hey, Black friend, I want you to come on my show and talk about what I can do so that it looks like I feel bad for what's going on right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Does anybody else? Oh, sorry, sis. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm talking now.
Does anybody else feel like a lot of white folks are going through like the stages of grief when it comes to reconciling with their role in just letting the status quo kind of fly? There's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right?
Most definitely.
Am I wrong? Is it just me?
You're so right.
Tell me if I'm wrong, because this tea is hot, sis.
You're not wrong. Sip it.
No,
They deny that it happened. Now that they see that it's happening and that it's happening to them, remember that old God help that poor old man who got knocked down by the police. But now it's like, oh, well, gasp! I can't believe it. Yeah, believe it. Yeah. Welcome to the party. We got jackets
for any of us. Like we've been there.
They haven't gotten to bargaining yet, but I think that they are trying to. Some of them are trying to. Some of them are like, okay, well, here, let me, like Serena Williams' husband, he stepped down from Reddit and said, I'm vacating my spot so a Black person can come to the table. That to me is kind of bargaining-ish. And that was a massive step because you know how much money that man has? Yeah.
Probably enough to step down from Reddit.
That part. And he still has stock.
He'll be just fine. He'll be okay.
Yeah.
I would say, moving on from this kind of in a trajectory sort of way, in this time of unrest, we were talking about allyship. And what are some of the most invaluable traits that you could wish for in an ally or allies as they're starting to come together, willing to help the cause of Black Lives Matter, but in a measurable way and not in a performative way, that we can continue to keep them accountable?
I could keep it real short. Mine is really easy. Resiliency and consistency. Keep doing it. That's it. Educate yourself. Do one thing, do two things.
Educate yourself and do not ask other Black people to educate you.
Don't ask me.
I'm tired.
I'm exhausted, right? Don't ask me.
Educate yourself and stick with it. We did it for 400. We did it every day I was born. I did it. I woke up in the morning and I got stories. I ain't gonna go through them. But for me personally, making it work for me is resiliency. Stick with it even though you might lose friends or you might
people that you believe were not that way, and then all of a sudden they're not. They are, and you're like, oh my gosh, whatever.
Or it's not trendy anymore.
And not keep it. That's my
and sit with that discomfort. Like, all of the allies that I have invited into my circle have acknowledged publicly and like on record and like in a way that I have heard them and spoken to them, the ones that are in my circle, right? The ones that are helping me build my movement, they have all acknowledged, you know, the discomfort that I feel right now isn't worth, like, is worth more to me, like, in the way that I'm willing to sit in it than you having to feel uncomfortable every time you step outside of your home, every time that you walk into any space, every time you get behind the wheel of your car. That your comfort is worth more to me than my discomfort, and I'm willing to sit in that discomfort and face some hard truths and go talk to my family about racism tonight. Like, that to me is allyship. And also what you were saying about like, don't ask me, like, don't, like, and I'm not like, don't pretend to ask me, don't like ask me in a covert way, don't say something else and then ask me the real question, like, don't hit me up on the phone and be like, oh, what can I do? No, don't ask me. Be self-reflective.
Absolutely.
Call yourself in. Take a moment to think about like, okay, when was a moment that I could have done something like this? And then sit in that. And don't text me about it. Just be with it. Be with it.
Yeah, but it's hard for people to be with themselves, and I think they're starting to finally learn that in this. And I think that's also a really dark underbelly of our system too, is how we view emotions. You know, we don't want to be feeling bad. We don't want to be feeling guilty. We just want the answer now. We don't want to take time to educate ourselves and practice it like it's a new language.
Yeah, and I can definitely understand that. I think like when this kind of like new like kind of rebirth of this movement kind of happened, I had a lot of people asking me like, oh, is it okay if I post this? Is it okay is this racist if I tweet it? Like, can you give me some articles on how I can educate myself? And then I would do it because, like, you know, I'm like, okay, fine.
Google.
And I'm like, Google is free. Please.
Yeah. Google is free.
I give up.
Say it again. Say it again.
You know what? I will happily educate you, but you have to pay me. I'm so sorry, but I'm not doing this for free anymore because I'm so tired.
Can't teach for free.
There are so many resources. You can look to any of your friends, you know. And, you know, and another topic, I think allyship to me is definitely more than just posting a black tile, you know, saying like amplify Black voices and then not doing anything else. I don't think that's allyship at all. I think that's the definition of being performative. You know, you think you're making a point by like putting a black screen. That's not doing anything. Like, you have to actually do the work, put the effort in. It's no one else's job to educate but yourself. You know, I've had several people who I thought, you know, could figure this out say, oh, some people just don't know. You have to tell them. You have to tell them how to do it. You can't call people out. You can't hold them accountable if they don't know. And I'm like, yes, I can. Because you can.
There are endless resources.
Yes, ma'am. And have been since the dawn of time. It's like, I'm frustrated, I think, mostly with this because I am not the first person, and Toni Morrison wasn't the first person. And all of the incredible Black literati that we have who were just brilliant minds were also not the first people to have these thoughts, you know? And so it goes back decades, and even like if you're really willing to listen to like go to the Library of Congress and listen to slave narratives told in the first person, it goes back generations of people who have shared their stories. I am tired of reliving my traumas in a public forum. I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Apologize.
No.
I'll throw in there. There is a very informative. I don't know, what is that? An informative result. There is an effect that comes with when you choose to go and find it yourself. It's different than when someone gives it to you, but when you go out and reach and grab it and find it yourself, there's an entirely different learned experience.
Absolutely.
This is a reason we focus so heavily on educate yourself versus tell me. Not that I want, come to me and I'll tell you. I'm an educator only in signs of education in terms of like, let me go through the history of time. I'm going to do that. And you don't want to go through that because I'm the professor, so I'm going to do that. That's awful. Yeah, But what you'll want to do is you have a very different experience when you reach out and go look and find and look, and then the light bulb goes boom out of nowhere. It's a very different experience, and you know this. We can go through example after example of things that aren't race related, and when you reach out and find and search for that knowledge and search for that information, search for that, and then you discover it, you take ownership of it.
Mm-hmm.
Take ownership of what you've learned, of what you've picked up, of what you've received. You've owned it, and the moment you've owned it, and
It's
that's
yours
not
forever.
Yeah.
Latinos across the board. When we're talking about coming across the border, let it be known, this was their land first.
Hey,
Yeah.
Belonged across the board first. Let's be honest. California, Texas. California is the 6th largest economy in the world. It belonged to them first. Add Texas with it,
Mm-hmm.
it might be the 3rd largest economy. And I'm just saying, when you educate yourself, and I'm being a little passionate, I apologize, but that's why educate yourself. There's a different kind of ownership to it. Now you own it. Now it's yours. Now you can go and you can deliver that.
Right.
If I can take the time to learn Shakespeare, if I can go through sonnets, if I can read Stanislavski and listen to Rachmaninoff, if I can read Amy Tan and Sandra Cisneros,
okay.
I can, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like art is one of the best ways to immerse yourself in it. It's a wonderful introduction to a culture. Go see a play.
Yes.
Go watch a movie. Go watch The Color Purple. Go watch the Joy Luck. I mean, just watch it and just let that be your little intro,
Benny,
as it
perfect.
were.
Benny, thank you so much. Judd, you guys as well. You gave us the perfect transition. But there is one thing that all of us here share, aside from like wanting to invoke this change, wanting to have these conversations, is that we come from a place of a theater background. And we want to take the second half of this roundtable to talk specifically about theater and race. And the first thing that we want to reach out and ask you guys about is tokenization and typecasting. What is that like? We want to hear those experiences. Tell us what it feels like, what it looks like, how you've experienced it. Let's jump into it.
Whew, wow. If you don't mind, I'd love to go into this because theater. I'm a teacher now. Myself, Judd, and Jeff. I know we're all educators, but I'll be honest with you. If I had made it, as an actor, as my old professor, there was an old professor at Dominguez Hills who was a very, very, very excitable, eccentric German Jew named Hal Marienthal. He was an unbelievable teacher, but the thing was, he also liked to cultivate teachers. And I remember when I first was about ready to graduate from college, he thought that I would be this fantastic actor. He thought I was going to be a fantastic performer. And he says, that the time is fleeting when you become a performer. There's going to come a time where they're not going to ask for you as much as they did before. He says, what I want you to do before you graduate, I want you to take this test. It was the CBEST. And he says, when you're done, I want you to go back to the cities and I want you to give back everything that and he was referring to himself and other teachers, I want you to give back everything that we gave you. And that meant an awful lot. But theater was something that, a kid growing up being a stutterer like I was a big thing. And to come there and see this was an amazing thing. It freed me up for the way I did speak. I like Benny would say, I was chastised for years of my entire life with people telling me that I talked white. And it was even to this day, I still hear it. But theater was an incredible outlet for all of that. And I had the greatest opportunity during those college years to experience more of it because we had people who were open-minded, as far as casting was concerned. Now, on a couple of occasions, there were some clunkers. The best example is we did a show about 35 years ago there called You Can't Take It With You. And it was very interesting that, I auditioned for everything that I could, but eventually the role came down to Donald and Reba. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the play, Donald and Reba are the family's maid and the maid's boyfriend. And that, we took the part, but we and the department took a lot of heat for it. And I understood, but my objective was, and I explained this to the people, was that I wasn't going to do Rochester. For those of you who are younger, you can probably look up Rochester. But,
I know Rochester.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be, right. I wasn't going to be Rochester. And, and my wife was not going to be, Butterfly McQueen. We were going to be real people. I was going to be an old Louisiana uncle of mine. And we had people come in and try to teach us how to play this character. And again, they were playing it very stereotypically over the top. And we just couldn't do it. We just couldn't do it because not only could we not live with ourselves, but they probably would have burned down that theater. And so, that was one of the first experiences of understanding, the racial dynamic of theater, of being cast in something against type. Now, I have been turned down so many times for roles for opposing reasons. One, because I looked too black. And I've also been turned down for roles because I didn't sound black at all, or I didn't act black, or I got, I was not cast in certain black shows because, quote, I don't demonstrate the black experience enough. A kid who basically who grew up in Compton did not, understand the black experience, which was, very, very interesting. But tokenism, that is, in other words, that is tokenism. It's when you have a set expectation of a particular, type, behavior. That's all that is. I remember back in '92, and it's amazing I say '92 because this was early '92 before the whole Rodney King issue, is that I auditioned at a theater, a very prominent theater, with a friend of mine who was white, British, beautiful British lady, and we wanted to audition for the show California Suite by Neil Simon. And again, this was a long time ago. I don't know if any of you remember the movie, but the character I wanted to play in the movie was played by Michael Caine, and she was playing a character done by Maggie Smith. We auditioned, and she was asked to come back up and read with a couple of other men. I was asked to read that part with constant, I would say maybe about 7 or 8 women that night. And then I was called back, and I read again for about another half dozen women for that same part, with that same part. By the time it was over, this director took me aside as she was, thanking everyone for being there and was ending the night. She took me aside and told me how great my audition was, but then said, well, this neighborhood is very conservative, and I don't think that they would tolerate, a mixed marriage. And again, this was '92. That particular theater has since become an incredible beacon for open casting since then. But it's just hard to believe, again, when you think about it, that was, just a little over 20 years ago. So this has not changed. Again, I think about that a lot because I imagine, Jared, Jeff, and so many other people, you've seen the experiences about the way you look, the way you sound, your demeanor, and so forth. When you talk about name changing, Jared, I mean, how many people have seen your name, but then were surprised, you know, at your appearance?
All of them, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So it's just amazing, because it seems like tokenism and non-colorblind casting pretty much are the same thing, because the expectations are the same.
I agree. I've had I've had a lot of similar experiences as you, Robyn, where it's like I don't usually go out for shows that usually portray like a Black experience, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm Black enough. I've never felt Black enough to audition for that stuff. But then it's like, when I go and audition for stuff that's more like classical, which is like more of my voice type, and more stuff that's like non-traditional for someone who looks like me, I'm wondering if I'm too Black for it. You know, I'm like, do I look the right? I'm sure I sound the right way, but do I look the right way? And it's a struggle, because like, and then when I get cast in something, you know, I just assume that, oh, I'm just the token Black girl then. Like they could have easily just cast a white woman, but then said like, I'm here, so like, woohoo, like, and it's a struggle, and it's hard. And I'm really hoping to see a change, because I've been so lucky enough to play different roles that have not been cast, you know, as a Black woman before, like Mary Poppins and Alice Murphy and Bright Star and Nikki Harrison Curtains when I did it with Alchemy. Those are not roles that you probably have ever seen a Black person play before, but I was able to tell those stories. So it's possible, but still, even after like making that change and having that impact on myself, I don't know if I go into auditions and I'm like, how Black do I need to be in order to book this show? Or how Black do I need to not be to book this show?
Beautiful conversation. I love this part to me, especially what you just said, you know, Kumari, is this, and this is where I go back to the concept of decolonizing our own minds. The moment that you think that you're not, quote unquote, Black enough, is already ingrained in you. What Black means is this thing, and since you don't fit, you believe you don't fit that thing. Therefore, you shouldn't be doing those. Black experience is as diverse and is as you know, it is not monochromatic, it is multichromatic, right? It is as
Amen.
It is as many people. To be Black is not to be I'm from Inglewood. I was born in the hood, in Inglewood, back in, you know, I've been there, done that. I know how to crip all
Come on.
He did the arthritic gang signs.
No. Never that.
But for someone to tell me that I can't do, you know, I can't do any kind of Shakespeare, or I can't play Macbeth, I can drop 4 monologues from Macbeth right now. It is because it's because they didn't choose it. It's because it took a moment for me to say, rather I sound like you think I should sound like, or I am just me. I'm Black because of my skin. I'm not Black because I'm fitting what you think I'm fitting. So that's one. Decolonize the mind first. It begins there. Once you do that, it goes. I do have something else, more information there to you know, to share on this. I have there's a list of sort of you know, white privilege in the theater community, and I saw that, and I would love to share this list. I'm gonna let someone speak first. I'm gonna pull the list, and then I would love to share that list with you guys. I'll let someone speak first.
I would love to jump on this train. I obviously cannot speak to the experience of Black actors, but my name is Monika Peña, and nobody ever knows how to say Peña, so I have considered changing my name. And even though I am fully Hispanic, obviously I look very white. And I have also gotten the, oh, wow, you sound really great for being Hispanic, and oh my God, I just don't see you as Hispanic, blah, blah, blah. But I know that I have been very privileged to pass for white. And sometimes I'm privileged to pass for Hispanic, but sometimes I have not been Hispanic enough. And I have gone to those auditions that celebrate the culture and the heritage, thinking, okay, I have to do my hair like this. I have to speak a little bit like this and show them that I have an accent. I go into that audition and saying, hi, my name is Monika Peña, because I want them to know that I'm Hispanic. I do know about my culture and heritage, and I can share the story just as well as anybody else who's darker than me. So it's like kind of the opposite side of the table, but know that that is certainly an experience for the whole BIPOC community, and it sucks.
So speaking to that a little bit, it's so interesting that we happen to be talking about changing names so much, because I did change my name. My whole family did. I was born Ryan Kusz, Kusz, and that's my father's adoptive father's stepfather's name. That was a different spelling than the original because it got changed during World War I. So we just felt that we had no connection to it. And then when my father did a service where he found his birth mother, her family name was Lee, and we were like, but this was before we changed our name, and we were like, Korea basically sold my dad. The adoption policies that were there were so messed up at the time, and so we just picked a new one that we liked, and it's so I try really hard to remember the privilege that I have, but I have to like push down those intrusive feelings of jealousy of just like a culture, because I feel am I even second gen because my dad was adopted like as an infant, and it's I love being included in these spaces so much, because it is so freaking hard to find community when you're in these positions.
I want to honor your truth. Thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I have agreed. Absolutely, 100. I have a question for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel any sense of betrayal or any sense of that you've let down the other parts of you that you're not giving voice to, giving story to? Do you ever feel that there's any kind of, at least within yourself? I'm sorry to be.
No, please. So I went to school thinking I was going to be a musical theater major, and I left as a playwriting concentration. And I wrote a play called The Dust of the Street. It's up on New Play Exchange if anybody wants to read it. It's all my plays have me surrogates because I'm a young playwright and I don't know how to do anything else. So the character, who is basically me, gets shot as part of a hate crime, and goes to heaven and meet his grandmother, who gave his dad up. And I think about this so often, because I am never going to speak to a relative from that side of the family. I am never going to meet my grandmother, or my father hasn't even met his father. I know I have cousins in Korea who I will never meet. And it's this incredible dichotomy of really viscerally hating them because they gave us up and sent me to this place where I'm hated for being different, and wanting so badly to know them, to know their stories, to know my history. Literally the only connection I have to Korea in any way is the fact that I have my black belt in Taekwondo. That's that and this, which I found on Google. That's about all I got. And so it's I do feel in a way that I have let them down because I don't speak. I've never been to Korea. I don't I have to Google anything about the culture that I want to know. It's
Let me tell you, you're not alone, because I'm not a Spanish speaker.
Mm-hmm.
I have been to, Guatemala, where most of my family's from, but talk to my family, they all say that I'm a white girl, so sometimes I write that line too, of like, am I Hispanic enough? Should I be telling these stories? Am I allowed to? But I'm fully Hispanic, but I'm not Hispanic enough for the community. So where do I lie? So you're not alone.
No, you're not alone. You're not alone at all. I was adopted by a white family as an infant, and that has informed my experience, theater and otherwise. But the very first time I was in a show was Godspell, and I played Judas. and it was an all-white cast except for me, and I mean, and that, which was, it was fine. I was fortunate in that way, meaning I didn't come into theater going, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. I mean, at least from my experience of the theater, I did have that feeling and those attitudes, but that came from within. And now we're back to institutional racism and how deep-seated it is. Because, I remember getting, in college and being in a theater class and being given a monologue, and he gave me a monologue of a black person, and so I had to go through all of these feelings of like, okay, well, it was sort of written in dialect, and I'm like, this is not at all, like, I don't know how to do this, and why did he give this to me anyway? Like, and I remember just being sort of annoyed, but also being mixed in there was like, can I do this? Like, is someone gonna call me out if I do this? And what, and I was young too, so I didn't know how to react really to that. So, but largely I have had really good experiences in terms of roles I've played, in terms of just being, whatever, most recently with Alchemy, I played Lurch, Lurch the butler. So, and that was great, and Ryan, who directed it, was, like, oh, I think you should play Lurch. And I remember thinking, oh, really? Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome. And then the other, more recently or before that was, in fact, Robyn and I both know this story. We both auditioned for the same role, and he got the role, but I got cast as this white character who was described as this white character, and again, just fortunate things. But I almost didn't audition for the role because I was thinking, for the role that Robyn got, because I was thinking, I read the part, and I just didn't know, can I do, like, I don't know. But again, it's not exactly the question of being typecast necessarily, as much as just this internalization of what I can bring to something, or what I don't think I can bring to something, or that someone will call me out on, or someone, am I black enough? It's that same kind of thing, and that it's even a thought is sort of, a broad statement about the issue.
Yeah,
right?
I am really.
Interesting. Is that? I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Oh well, I'll make it quick. I'm really interested. I'm really interested in when we come. There's obviously, we all know there's different levels and stages when it comes to the stage or TV and film, or in terms of our careers as artists, as storytellers, as actors, right? There's different levels and stages of the career. There's that educational theater that's a realm within its own. Multiracial casting, multicultural casting, what does that look like in terms of my realm, in terms of theater at the university level? What does it mean at high school level? What does it mean at the, community theater level? What does it mean at the semi-professional, not quite off Broadway? What does it mean with Broadway? What does it mean with LA TV and film commercial? All of those realms have very different experiences when it comes to understanding race, culture, identity, and what we claim. It has a very different impact on every single level. The moment we believe, and I'm victim of this, and I speak to this as someone not because of my experiences with the folks I work with, but my own, and my own experiences. When I thought that I was winning, because I was winning at the high school, college level, I was like, bruh, you were the guy, got it. And then I got to the professional level, and then I wasn't the guy. What happened? It wasn't that I was the guy. I wasn't the guy. It was that something happened, or I got to the community level, and I wasn't winning there, or I wasn't winning. So all these different levels, like where are we losing? We're missing something here, and so I think I'm really interested in that dynamic. I'm interested in where that through line connects itself, where I can speak to folks, young folks, or folks, people of color, going, hey, where do you stand? Where do you lay? Or in terms of your, who are you as a character? Who are you? Are you the ingenue? Are you the character role? Are you the leading man? We don't. In college, maybe you were. In high school, oh, absolutely. Now all of a sudden here you're not, and over there you're not. It's just this whole dynamic that changes. Where my friend Jeff, he sees something there, but then if he were to go to Hollywood, Jeff, you have a completely different experience. I can promise you. I know. I'm letting you know. You have a very different experience there, and that's where I find it really. Multicultural casting, how do we handle that? That's a very good question, very tricky question. But the biggest thing for me in terms of a possible solution is that we tell the honest stories of the people that we are representing. That's it. That's it.
Absolutely. You it's so wonderful hearing that from you, because over time it depends on how strong a character you have, but you tend to fall into that whole categorizing yourself at times. Because again, I remember Jeff at that audition. I thought it wasn't you, but there was someone else. And I don't know if I told you that, but there was someone else who read for that part that I ended up playing. And he got up there, and I mean, he looked and sounded, at my best example is like Cedric the Entertainer. And I'm listening to him and I'm watching him, and my heart sunk, because all of a sudden something I was indoctrinated with kicked in with me. I said, wow, that person's going to get that part because he sounds blacker than me. And I kicked myself when I actually said it out loud to a friend. I didn't, it didn't kick in until I actually said it loud enough. And I said, oh my gosh, I actually have soaked this in. And it's really, fascinating, because just like you were saying, Judd, what you have to do is you have to represent that person, that character. I'm an actor. I'm an actor who happens to be black, and that can be can be you can allow that to carry you a long way, I believe, if you're really strong and confident enough with it. But again, the decolonization, the terminology you use there, it's that belief and understanding of what you're there for, and that's to be an actor. When I played that part, the director I had at that particular time, he said, that he cast me not even thinking about the black part, but that the human aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And with Jeff and the Butler monologues, yes, I was playing a black character, but I was playing a black character, and this was what I love about Jeff and Ryan, the director, and Kelsey, all of you, because not only did you deal with this eccentric, but you gave me the opportunity to play something that years ago I would have either been afraid to play, wouldn't have been ready to play, or felt like I wasn't good enough to play. So I stretched myself, to play that particular type of character, and it was so much fun. It was so liberating. It was so relieving to do that. And from this point forward, just like everything else, I have kind of a sense of confidence, because in addition to other casting that's taken place, I mean, Hamilton knocked the theater world on its keister. Mm-hmm. By having a black guy playing George Washington and no one batting an eye about it. That that show in itself was a wake-up call, and it made me feel better as an actor, although I wish it had happened when I was younger, but it made me feel fantastic just seeing it and seeing that this happened.
No, absolutely. No, I agree. I think, sorry about my dog if you guys hear her, but I think that, you know, I've heard some people say like the audience will believe like whatever you tell them. Yeah. And I feel like I think that's true. And it's not saying anything like, and it's not even like a negative statement. It's like, you know, I played a character, you know, I played a leading lady, and my character's mother was played by a white woman. But like no one really said anything because it was like, okay, she's playing my mother. She's not playing a white woman, and I'm not playing a black woman. We're playing two women who are mother and daughter, because that's something that it's possible, you know, it's possible in this day and age. It doesn't have to always be, you know, I don't know how to say it. Like, I guess when I do a role that's non-traditional, you know, sometimes I get asked, oh, should we change the story to make it about how you're a black woman? And I'm like, no, we don't have to do that. Like, I'm just playing this role. I am telling this story as an actor, as any actor would. You know, I happen to be black, like, just like you said, Robyn, I am an actor who happens to be black. And I think that's something that a lot of directors, like, I would love to get that message out, and I try to get that message out as much as I can. It's like, we are all actors. We are trying to tell stories. We don't want to just tell stories that are about the black experience. We love to tell those stories, but we want to be given the opportunity as anyone else to
be a human being,
because you are more than
our own humanity.
I mean, with sort of like roles where like the race is integral to the storyline, like Maria in West Side Story, like Celia in The Color Purple. Those are roles that, you know, you're gonna stick to like those races. But like, you know, I played Mary Poppins. It doesn't matter what race she is. It's the story that's being told. At the heart of it, it's the story that's being told. And I think that's something that's very important, you know, in terms of like casting and like diversity in casting. And it's just something to think about.
Yeah, and I think we need to
anybody watch Grey's Anatomy? Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It's hard on Zoom, I know. I just wanted to say, I think the fault in us as community members of the theater is we are not giving our audiences the benefit of the doubt to be better and to be able to understand all of those things. Why are we constantly being like, oh, but will our audiences understand that? People aren't stupid. No. They can figure it out.
And especially now they're coming to the theater, like I feel like theater is such an all-encompassing art form that like people go to experience something, right? And so they're not just like, it's not like movies where you can turn on Netflix and be there, right? Theater is intentional. It's an intentional experience. You're intentionally, and I think people who are intentionally seeking out that experience are smart and capable. Like, let them
not be enabling them to not want to be broadened and enlightened. Don't enable our audiences by thinking they won't get it.
Amen.
Let's challenge them, right?
Yeah. Chandra Wilson, who plays Dr. Bailey on Grey's Anatomy, that role was originally written for a Jewish lady. Fun fact. And casting was like, you're just dope as you know what, we're just going to cast you. Point blank, period. And I think a lot of the reason why people are afraid to trust the audience is because they don't trust themselves. And a lot of that also comes from their limited, myopic point of view. Yeah. And I think what would help is if we had more people of color in the writers' rooms, if we had more people of color in the directing role. We need more people of color as producers, because we're comfortable. If you can't do it, let us do it. We will gladly. Gladly do it. No problem, no question. And it doesn't always have to be pearly. It doesn't always have to be Flower Drum Song. It doesn't always have to be fill in the blank. It really does start at the level of the writers and the creators. And it's just weird. You see something like Caroline or Change, and yes, it's a Black story and yay representation, but it was directed by a white dude. Now, I'm not saying that white people can't relate. Steven Spielberg directed The Color Purple. And we all know that that's embedded in the cultural subconscious of every Black woman in America. I can name very few Black women that I've met that can't spout out a quote at the drop of a hat. You told Harpo to, yeah, we all know it like the back of our hand. But I think by getting more people, you're giving them a seat at the table, having more discussions like this, where we all air out our grievances. We have more in common than we don't. Monica, you know what it's like to question your own ethnicity. Ryan, you know what it's like to question your own ethnicity. Every last one of us has had a moment where we're like, well, wait a minute, do I fit the prototype of, you know? And based on that thread alone, I believe in my heart of hearts that we are more than capable of changing people's perspective on what it means to be a human being.
Yeah, amen. Right. Just being a human, period, right?
Yeah, and it's what mirrors society in itself. I mean, I remember telling my wife before I went to the protest last week that I was going to stay back, just watch, and not get engaged with anything. But I remember within about 3 minutes after I got there, when I heard one of the right-wingers on the other side say something to me, I immediately just walked over as calmly as possible with my hands behind my back and got into a discussion where this person's holding this sign up in front of my face saying law and order. And I said, you know, my first question to him was, whose law and whose order? And that became a really big, almost a kind of a shouting match between us where I'm just repeating the question. And I said, I don't remember anyone like me being at that table, you know, in Philadelphia in either 1776 or 1787, you know, establishing, you know, what law is going to apply to who. And I said, so I had no bearing on this, and no one I know had any bearing on this. The same applies to, you know, like you just said, having that seat, not just having that seat in the legal arena, but having that seat at the writer's table, just like you just said. And I know it's not the most politically correct example to use today, but one of the first things about it is I think of the Cosby Show. What the Cosby Show did was it did something that Good Times, the Jeffersons at Times, and various other shows did not do. It presented a family, just like anyone else's, that just happened to be Black. Right. There is not, just like you were saying, there isn't enough out there in theater where, you know, someone can walk in and say, oh, I want to play that particular part because that's a human being, you know, not necessarily because if you want to do a play with a Black character, again, that has to be a character of someone who's gone through the struggle, who's had to, you know, overcome this and so forth. You know, it's always struggling and overcoming and dealing with and so on and so forth, but never about just living a life, never dealing with it, you know, like the family in You Can't Take It With You, or in something so simple as Our Town, you know, and things like that, where it's just a slice of life. Again, just like Judd had even said, being Black is a kaleidoscope. There are so many ranges. Not all of them have to have, you know, the guy with the funny hat yelling dynamite, or it doesn't have to have the guy with the ball cap on backwards who just happens to rap quite a bit. You know, there are, and when you have the person who is the genuine, you know, Black guy who speaks white, he gets ridiculed. He becomes the Carltons, you know, the Carlton on Fresh Prince and so forth. You know, I loved Carlton, you know, because, you know, for better or for worse, Carlton was me. And that's, you know, just like, and again, so I applaud what you're saying is getting that voice, you know, on the, you know, at the writer's table, you know, to get that feedback on there. And I mean, Spielberg, like you were saying, you know, made Color Purple and Amistad and some of these other films that were fantastic films. But once in a while, you know, while he's making this film, he actually let Oprah sit with him and discuss what's the best way we can do this. He would talk to Whoopi and say, you know, what's the best way you can do this? Or he would tell Danny Glover, where's the dark part that you can bring out, you know, in this particular character that you've experienced in your life. So
communication.
It's all about inclusive, being inclusive.
Open dialogue.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
Open dialogue.
Now we are running a little bit shorter on time, and I'm sure Jared and I want to thank you all for joining us, and we want to put it to our last kind of groups of questions. But we're gonna start it out by saying that we at Alchemy Theater Company are still relatively young compared to other theater companies, but we are dedicated to creating a safe environment for creatives of all races, ethnicities, and gender identities, and that's something that we've taken very seriously since our inception. And I very firmly believe that involves taking creatives of all of those different backgrounds in front of and at the table. And our last question to rather finish this roundtable is, what do we hope for right now? Because we are all very ready to put forward every action possible to see that this moment continues. It doesn't grow stagnant, and it doesn't sort of fizzle out as we've seen happen in the past. And we hope to carry this momentum to hopefully create a better tomorrow for Black Americans and all other minorities as well. But what does this hope look like? What does this brighter future look like? And what are some steps that we can collectively take as a theater community or as a society on how to get there?
Yeah. If I may, what I think is the most important thing for theater right now is self-reflection. I think right now is a time where we have to really step up, because I think diversity, equity, inclusion, those are all words that we use a lot in the entertainment and theater community, right? But BIPOC artists and administrators and audiences, we're all suffering, right? But I think it's time for us to move forward, and we all have to do what we can do to make the commitments to take action. And I think for theater makers and people who curate theater spaces, that means not just hiring diversity, but like valuing BIPOC voices, BIPOC thoughts, BIPOC artistry, and amplifying those voices. So I personally have taken the momentum of this movement and created an initiative called the Judd Jackson Initiative. I spoke a little bit about it earlier. I'm the founder and director. And what we've done is developed a really unique assessment, right, that challenges arts organizations to identify behavior that could have been harmful to BIPOC and specifically Black artists in the past, and give them tools to formulate actionable solutions. And it's not necessarily meant to call theaters out, right? But it's calling them in, right? Calling them into the movement, calling them into making our theaters not just safe, not just safer, but the safest spaces for BIPOC people to live in and thrive. And I think the first step towards that challenge is self-reflection. So this is something that I wanted to do, to call people who are in charge of maybe, young theater companies who are looking for what to do. Call people in whose theater companies are now going to be completely restructuring because of COVID-19. We wanted to create this assessment, and it's not easy, it's got some really difficult questions to sit with. But I think the first step in anything is reflecting on what we've done. The second step is committing to doing what we need to do in the future. And then the third step after that is taking action, right? And so this assessment is going to help theater companies develop plans like that. We're not doing the work for them. We're asking them to examine their own behavior and then put forward their commitments, and then possibly even go as far as sharing those commitments with the public. This is what we're going to do to make sure that BIPOC voices are heard, valued, and acknowledged. This is what we're going to do, and this is how you can do it too. And then calling other theater makers in on that movement, and using this social pressure, this time of social pressure where everybody's like, what can we do? Not in a way that's for anyone's personal shine, but in a way that creates the safest environment for all of us to make theater together. So that's kind of what I've been working on with my beautiful and wonderful team, comprised of lots of allies who are on the forefront of my mind in what I look for in allyship, and what I look for in people who are wanting to join together and create, actualize these ideals, of diversity, equity, and inclusion for all of us.
think
that's incredible. And for anybody, oh, sorry, Kumari,
I'm sorry.
For just a second. For anybody who's listening right now who doesn't know what the acronym BIPOC means, could you tell us?
Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It's the B and the I are usually the ones that are left out in the umbrella, right? The POC umbrella is there to protect us. Everybody identifies themselves within that umbrella, but oftentimes at the bottom of those discussions are Black and Indigenous people. So BIPOC really brings out the people who are not thought of in the people of color umbrella and brings those voices to the forefront of that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna answer the question. And I think what you're doing is just so amazing, Gabby, and I'm just like so inspired by it. And like, as someone who is, I'm 20 years old, I'm a college student, and something among my peers, I have, many like peers who are like BIPOCs and, other people of color. And something that I hear often among all of them is like the fear of like going out for stuff. It's like, why do I want to like waste my time going out for something if, I'm not going to even be seen, if I'm going to be cut right away. And I think that with what you're doing, Gabby, is going to help, and also I think it's, our job as actors to like encourage each other and to go out for those things that maybe like we were afraid of doing like at first, or we were afraid maybe we won't be seen in like this role, we won't be seen in this show, we won't be seen for this company. And I think that's going to make a big difference, because something that I've heard from many people in the industry that I've like discussed this with personally, it's them saying, well, we want to have that inclusivity, we want to like do all of this, but when I see everyone who shows up, there's the ratio of like white people to people who aren't white is just so drastic. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's the job of the actor as well. We have to show up for stuff. We have to, believe in ourselves. And I think that with this time alone, with this time to self-reflect as actors, and to see these theater companies having these discussions and making these changes and I can only hope that it's going to give us all the confidence that we need to like put ourselves out there.
Yeah, that's exactly why we're creating that tool too, to put ourselves out there, right? To make those spaces safe.
And I think part of a theater company's job to address that ratio discrepancy is to mend that bridge that has been burned. I think BIPOC actors, community members have been burned so bad and time again through so many audition experiences, and feeling that way, like, why did I even waste my time coming out here? You said you wanted diversity, but your mission isn't really to be diverse and inclusive. You're just doing this because you kind of have to. A theater community's job right now, since we're already rebuilding how a theater has to work under a pandemic, we have to figure out, how do we make people feel safe first and foremost? How do we address our grievances? So like you said, Gabby, I firmly believe in any scenario, the first step is always acknowledging that you have to do work. Acknowledging your faults, acknowledging your bias, things that you did not intend to do but had an impact, right? Address that first, and like you said, then we go to the action plan. But we got to realize as theater companies that we did wrong unintentionally, and we did not create the safe space that the arts should have.
Exactly.
I'd like to again, kind of make a broader statement that isn't specific necessarily to what theaters can do, but it's also making a correction. I'm sort of making a correction to what Tucker, you said earlier about that we all sort of want to make lives better for BIPOCs. I hadn't heard that before. Thank you. But for BIPOCs, but I think it's really important to include white people in that, in making life better for, because it's again, going back to that idea of ownership and owning this issue, and white people stand to benefit too, so I'm not trying to correct you to call you out or anything, but to inclusive is a really important word, and that includes white people. And again, white people's lives are going to be better as a result as well. So I just wanted to offer that really quickly.
Because many of those white people are the gatekeepers.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Many of them own the production companies that we audition for. Many of them run the studios.
Sure. Yeah.
So
and
it's
many
important.
of their spaces are enriched by us.
That part,
well.
yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And I think once all of that takes place, what it will look like is Lovebirds with Issa Rae and Kumail Nanjiani. You had a black lady and you had an Indian, well, I don't know what he is, let me not mess it up, but an Asian guy as the leads in a romantic comedy that had nothing to do with them being black or Asian. It was just it was a couple having a funky experience. And then it also looks like Pose, where members of the LGBTQ plus community get to tell their stories from their perspectives. You have people from that community that are writers and that are directors, and them feeling empowered enough to stand in their truth and express that to the world. Art really is a reflection of the society. And I think I speak for myself. I can't speak for y'all, but I think our hope from all of this is to see ourselves reflected in the art that we consume.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody, again, so much for taking part in this discussion. If any of you have any other closing thoughts you'd like to say, we're almost perfectly on that 9 o'clock time frame. But if anybody else has anything else they want to say about anything that we discussed tonight, go for it.
Yeah, I knew I could tell a lot of the mindset that came with this, with you, Jared, and Tucker, and Jeff and Kelsey. You can usually tell when you're being condescended, pandered, and so forth. Mm-hmm. But one of the things again that I like to say that Judd had mentioned was the word consistency. Knowing you guys, for the time that I've known you, a person can tell when they are being pandered, talked down to, and so forth. But I could feel that heart, with all of you, and it comes from a genuine love of the art form, and I knew that again from those first few days of working with Alchemy, that this is something different. I've seen the pictures on the walls, it's a different world there than most places that you're used to, and I hope one day to continue working with you again, but I just can't put into words, and I've said this a number of times, that I can't put into words how this feels to be able to say all this. I mean, I sent little messages to different people. I let Judd know how much I appreciate it. Some of the terminology he used that I thought about but never could put to words. There's so many things that you all have been able to articulate that, for someone my age, the fact that, I couldn't come up with these for a while, it says a lot about you all. And in addition to the fact that, again, just like with the kids I saw at the protests, you're all so young, and you've got more years ahead of you than you do behind you. And yes, I do count you too, Jeff, because you still look like you're under 30. But this is something you guys really, I feel, hit a home run with. And again, I really appreciate everything you guys have done. And hopefully, one day we get to have a discussion like this again, only under not so adverse, circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
And can we also just take a moment to hold space for each other? And I want to personally thank everybody for sharing their experience. It's really, really hard to be self-revealing in a public forum like this. So I just wanted to hold space for all of you and tell you that I see your humanity and I see your hearts. And I thank you for sharing them with me and for creating this sacred space together.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Honored to be here.
Thank you guys so very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I'm glad we got to do something like this. We look forward to doing more stuff like this in the future. We've already talked to Jeff and Kelsey, and they were so on board with more of these discussions, and we can't wait. We lost Judd, as you guys can see. His phone died. So if he does have any closing thoughts that he wants to end on, we will post them somewhere. That way he still gets them out there. We can still see those thoughts somewhere. But thank you guys. Thank you. We appreciate all of you so much for this.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you.
Thank you so much.
Find me
Bye-bye.
on Facebook, y'all.
Yes. I am Gabrielle Jackson. Please find me.
Absolutely.
And joyjackson.org too.
Cool.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.